Got a feeling, a great feeling from Jimmy Lakey. Jimmy Lakey in the morning makes me feel alive. Woke me up this morning, now I'm up and on my way. Oh, 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 yeah, what a great way to start your day, the Lakey way.
That is a great way to start your day, the Lakey way. Jimmy Lakey is who the choir is referring to. That's the Jimmy Lakey Mass Choir. Brother Leroy puts them together every week, and every day they sing the song. So anyway, great way to start your day, Lakey Unleashed. Welcome into the House of Lakey, as the sign behind me says on the studio wall. The House of Lakey is a glorious and wonderful place, and I'm glad to have you here with me. Unleashed from the confines of corporate radio. After years of the confines of corporate radio, Lakey has been unleashed, and here we are together this morning as folks start to gather in for the streamcast. This live, it is now 10:04, running a couple of seconds late. I having a little equipment problem on my desk this morning, meaning I couldn't get my one of my monitors here working, but I got it working, and here we are, running a couple of seconds late, but nice to have all of you here on the program. If you're listening later in the day, you don't get to see the glorious program that we're talking about. I'm glad you get to hear it with your own ears this morning, and pleasure to be here with you. Jimmy is my name, and boom, Laura Carno's going to be with us this morning. Carno's usually with us on a Tuesday, but Carno's going to be with us at 8:15 this morning, Mountain Time, 10:15 Eastern Time. Carno comes up. Also, legal expert and guru John O'Connor, one of my faves, also on the program today. He's made his name in the day for being the attorney for Deep Throat back in the Watergate era. And John O'Connor's going to be here with us as well. So you don't want to miss it. It's action-packed for about the next hour, and it will let you get on about your merry way. Don't forget, wherever you're listening to the program at, chime in. Let us hear from you on the streaming platforms, wherever we're at. I'd love to hear from you on those platforms. So you just make a comment like the Dennis just did. You can see the YouTube logo, and it says, good morning, Jimmy. Well, good morning, Dennis. I mean that back to you. I type it, but I can't. I'm talking right now, and I probably would not do well. But Dennis says good morning on the YouTube. If you're listening on YouTube, we'd love to hear from you. If you're listening on the Rumble this morning as well, love to hear from you there as well. And Facebook, a lot of Facebook pages out there cover the show. I'd love to have you there as well. Let's dive into some news stories, shall we, this morning, before we get to the Laura Carno featured segment of the show here in just a few minutes away. Here's the question for you. Will House Republicans get a deal done? Evidently, there's been some squabbling behind the scenes. There's some Republicans that say, I'm not getting everything that I want. And so some Republicans say, I'm not getting enough of what I want. I heard Jim Jordan yesterday, who I have a great respect for him, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, also a leader in the hallowed halls of Congress, regular media commentator. And Jim Jordan said yesterday, he says, if we were to float any segment of this big, beautiful bill is what they call it, out to Republicans and say, yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. So they put all these ideas together because they have these rules in the U.S. Senate called reconciliation. And however they created them, I don't understand them. I'd probably take a master's class to learn it. But they have to frame a bill a certain way to get it past the cloture vote, which is the 60-vote majority of the supermajority that they have to get through in the Senate. So they have to have things under the framework of reconciliation. So Jordan said yesterday, listen, if we put all these bills out separately, Republicans will say, yeah, that's fantastic. But we put them together and people say, that's not so good. Donald Trump went down to the hallowed halls of Congress yesterday, and he met on Capitol Hill with the Republicans, and he said it was a love meeting. It was a love fest. It was, he said, it was no conflict. We've never been so united in our lives. And he says this bill delivers a conservative wish list. Let me go through some of the things. And according to several conservatives, including Jim Jordan, this is a list of conservative wishes, but it's got to get by the bickering on two different issues. One of the issues that is a big one is the SALT limitation. That is, SALT stands for state and local taxes. And those of us who live in a state that has had cities and taxes that take income tax, up for years they were really 100% deductible on your income tax. Well, that was unfair to the states that were not charging state income tax. You and I in high-tax Democrat-run communist states were getting a tax break that the freedom-loving Americans weren't. And so you have these Congress people in places like New York, I'm guessing I'm guessing Colorado as well, Illinois, that have these high and exorbitant state income taxes say, hey, we're not going to cut our spending. We're going to keep spending a heck of a lot of money on the state level, and we're going to keep taxing the death out of our people. So here's what we, as the state of Illinois, the state of New York, the state of California, we want you to offer a tax deduction, take it out of the federal coffers so that we can still spend a lot in our state. So the SALT deductions have been a big conflict of conversation, and we will see. And also, a lot of Republicans are a little hesitant or worried about the size of the spending cuts. Say, we got to cut more, we got to cut more. Give me your thoughts on that. I understand the thought of it, but when you have a one-seat majority in the House of Representatives and you have a caucus of Republicans as diverse as people from New York City to people to rural Nebraska, rural Kansas, you get the idea. You're going to have to, not everybody's going to get what they want. And if you were in a supermajority, you had a much larger majority, it would pave the way for something more epic. But this is a pretty good conservative wish list. But the two contentious points, according to President Trump and to Speaker Mike Johnson and Jim Jordan, are those SALT tax, state and local tax deductions, and how much of that should be deducted just because states have fiscal irresponsibility and are run by a bunch of freaking communists. Does that mean that the non-communist states should have to subsidize the tax policy of the other states? So that's been a big beef behind the scene. Mike Johnson, I think they worked all night last night. That's what I heard. They were going to work all night last night, and they're expecting possibly a bill as early as today to pass the House. Originally, they said the 4th of July, and then they said Memorial Day, which is this coming Monday, and there was some speculation that bill could pass as early as today. Again, if I read the bill from what I haven't read the entire bill, I'll be transparent, but everything that I'm reading about it, I'm not getting everything I want. But in a world in where you are a one-seat majority and you have a very diverse Republican caucus and not everybody speaks in unanimity, it's going to be tough to get everything that you want, and so I'm okay with that. Are you? Jim says on Facebook, Jim jumps in, pops up in the room and says, good morning from Fort Collins. Dennis says, good morning on the YouTube. Jim says, good morning on the Facebook. Where are you listening from? Always love to hear from you. Usually, look at it. We have Dennis, where I'm not sure where Dennis is at, I think Colorado. I can't memorize everybody's locations. Jim obviously is in Fort Collins, Colorado. So the last few days we've had Missouri and Arkansas checking in first. Missouri and Arkansas got beat to the punch in the chat room this morning. Always love to hear from each of you wherever you are listening. So the question of the news story of the day is this bill. Donald Trump went down and tried to get everybody on the same page yesterday. And will he be successful? Will the bill pass? Some people say it will pass, maybe even today, and the Republicans will get on board. What say you? There's been some talk about returning to pre-COVID spending levels. When you say you're going to do that, the Democrats say you're cutting the budget. No, we're just getting back to a baseline that we used to be at before the old pandemic happened for us. There's other talk and consideration that basically we're going to cut waste, fraud, and abuse and some fraudulent parts of Medicaid. And by the way, if you're an able-bodied working human being, you need to get out there and work. You don't just get free handouts. You have a work requirement when it comes to government handouts. If you're capable of working, you're not disabled, you can get your government help, but you're going to have to be working out there. That was a policy that Bill Clinton put in place back in his day in office. If you recall that, Bill Clinton fancied that idea back in the 90s, and Democrats now have gotten so far off of it that they're just fighting the oligarchs and wanting everybody to live on the government heat. But that is another one that the Republicans are, I guess, constantly fighting the drama and the hyperbole that comes from the Democrats that, hey, we found some waste, fraud, and abuse, and we're going to require people that are going to be on Medicaid and get on the government dole. If they're capable of working, they still need to be working while the government helps them. Democrats say that's a cut to Medicaid. So we can talk about that. What say you? What are you hearing? And do you think it'll get passed? These tax cuts, I love the fact, here's the main thing that I love. The Trump tax cuts are actually made permanent forever inside of there. Always notice in D.C. and at the state level, it'll always sort of sunset when it comes to a tax cut. But when it comes to a tax increase, there's no sunset. They always keep that thing going. And those Trump tax cuts happened in his first term, and they put a sunset on them. They expire at the end of this year, and that would be the largest tax increase on America. And the tax cuts are back in there. They're going to be made permanent in this piece of legislation. It's just got to get through the House, and some people say that happens today. What say you? Here's a story in which the right, the conservatives, the Republicans are they're grimacing at. They say this can't be true. We can't accept this truth. FBI Director Kash Patel and Deputy Dan Bongino are facing backlash from people that identify themselves as patriots. They have claimed that Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself. The newly appointed, this is from the Gateway Pundit, the newly appointed leadership under Director Kash Patel and Deputy Director Dan Bongino have ignited a firestorm across conservative circles after publicly backing the official narrative that Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide and brushing off explosive concerns about the shocking assassination attempts on President Donald Trump. During a tense Fox News appearance with Maria Bartiromo, the two Trump allies on Sunday celebrated as deep state slayers, parroted the same discredited government line that patriots have fought against for years. This is, again, the Gateway Pundit. During the interview, Bartiromo asked Patel and Bongino about a recent Senate testimony where he was grilled by John Kennedy of Louisiana about Epstein's death. And Kennedy asked, did Jeffrey Epstein hang himself or did somebody else kill him? And Patel's response was, Senator, I believe he hung himself in a cell in the Metropolitan Detention Center. When Bartiromo challenged Patel, noting that people don't believe it, Patel leaned on his experience as a public defender and prosecutor. And he said, I mean, listen, that they have a right to their own opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, what has been in the prison system and who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been segregated in housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was. Bongino jumped in and said he killed himself. Again, you want me to? I've seen this my whole life. He killed himself. So some people are saying that Bongino and Kash Patel have sold themselves out because they are getting rid of what had been called conspiracy theorists, and they are going to I watched that interview, and I didn't see that they were defending that. I mean, there were some moments in which they were getting put on the spot. They were pretty adamant, if I recall from the interview by memory, they were pretty adamant that Epstein had killed himself, but they said the assassination attempts were under continued investigation. So did Epstein kill himself? Kash Patel and Dan Bongino seem pretty convinced. They did not seem as convinced. And again, they kind of, hey, we have active investigations going on regarding the Butler, Pennsylvania assassination attempt is the one I am most curious about. So everybody hold on. The truth will come out. It always does. Whether you're lying, demented fool like Joe Biden pooping his pants and growing the cancer and not letting anybody know, or whatever you're doing, the truth does come out about these people that are supposed to serve the public trust. So we will find out. But Epstein, according to Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, did not kill themselves. They did not off themselves. He did off himself, and he was not suicided. He was not. All right. Glad to have you here on the program. Jimmy is my name. It is a Wednesday hump day edition of the show. Your thoughts on Kash Patel and Dan Bongino? The Gateway Pundit says patriots around America are very upset with Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. I wasn't. I watched the interview, and it was interesting. I was surprised that they so easily dismissed the suicide of the suiciding of Epstein, but they did seem to be a little bit more reserved when it comes to the fact of the Butler, Pennsylvania assassination attempt. John says, watch the video. The interview was not intense. It was conversational. I can agree with that. I think it was pretty conversational. It was Maria Bartiromo did push back and ask follow-up questions, which some politicians and pundits out there see that's intense, but I don't think it's that intense. But I would agree. If you do go back and watch the video, give us your conclusion. Give us your conclusions on that. All right, it's a glorious day the Lord has made. Always, wherever you're at, sign off on the platforms that you're watching on. We hear Dennis is out there on the YouTube. He's from Saquatch, Sasquatch, Colorado. Scott's up in Laramie. You had Jim signing in from Fort Collins. Scott's on the Rumble, by the way. Hello to Rumblers out there. We get great views on Rumble, but not live. A lot of our folks on Rumble watch throughout the day. But if you're watching live on Rumble, let us know, because your comments come right here to the chat room, as did Obnoxious Scott from Laramie. All right, Facebook, Twitter, X, you get the idea. Follow us and be sure to be a part of the program. And participation is you get bonus points, and at the end of the show, we'll be handing out gold stars to those who did participate. So sound off, let us know where you're at and where you're listening from. All right, we're going to talk about the budget deal. Will there be a budget deal coming out voted onto the House today? That is a very severe possibility after the Trump cheerleading session yesterday. And will the Republicans get a deal done? They may get it done as early as today. If you've read any part of the bill, I've read part of it. I don't get everything I want, but I think Jim Jordan's accurate. This is a Republican or conservative wish list of all the things. No tax on tips, stop the tax on Social Security, and just some other things that Donald Trump promised in his campaign. Also, it puts into some, we've been saying he's got to codify some things into law, and this does do that. Some of this budget reallocation for the border, it keeps the border secure as it has been made. And so I think it's a good start in the right direction. Now, you're going to have to get through the midterms. And if next year you can get through the midterms, then you're going to be facing a presidential election. It's harder to wrangle the cats together and herd them together in the second half of the term of office for Trump. But if you do the right thing, then you're not going to lose seats in the House. Maybe you could gain some seats in the House and the Senate in the midterm. And then you got to start playing to that, because you got Donald Trump in for the next 4 years. And if you lose the midterms, all the second half of this term is going to be rendered ineffective, because the Democrats are not going to try to win in the arena of ideals. They're going to start doing the impeachment game again, which hasn't gotten them that far so far, but they're going to keep doing it because they're really stupid people and they have no intellect. And so they're just intellectually bankrupt, and they have a Trump derangement syndrome that has caused them to be mentally disabled when it comes to an intellectual discussion on some policy. All right, did Epstein kill himself? There's a question of the day for you. Jump in on that one as well. One more question I want to ask you here this morning before you go too far. The stories, we're going to bring Laura Carno in, but the story of Joe Biden. And the Trump administration seems pretty hell-bent on this, and maybe the Department of Justice, James Comer's oversight committee, has said, we're going to bring the people in that operated the auto pen for Joe Biden, and we're going to bring those folks in for discussion. We're going to have a conversation with them and find out, what did Joe know? What did Joe not know? If you recall, the pardoning of his family was signed after Joe Biden had left the Oval Office and headed to the Capitol Rotunda for the inauguration. That's when that was released. And so were there bills and or executive orders and or legislation and or that were signed without the demented Joe Biden even having an awareness of it? Who was running the country? Who was making the decisions to sign by auto pen? And is there some kind of a criminality here? There are some pieces out there that are getting more and more hot on the trail of Dr. Jill Biden and her lust for power and her quest for authority and the elder abuse that I believe, in my opinion, that she perpetrated against Joe Biden. I know that we have Dr. Carol Lieberman, who was on the show yesterday, also believes that there was some elder abuse happening with Joe Biden. And who's controlling the auto pen? Here's a question of the day for you. I want to go to Laura Carno. Should the president be allowed to use the auto pen? And if he does use the auto pen, what should be the rules for it? What are the guidelines that should be on the auto pen? Should there be a provision for a president to use an auto pen? I don't think George Washington or Abe Lincoln ever had an auto pen. Not sure why we have become so lazy that we have to have auto pens now, but should the auto pen be allowed to be used by the American president? And do you think there's a possibility in any way that if it turns out Joe Biden was not aware of bills or executive orders that he signed, is there a path forward in which those can be revoked and made? And I'm thinking more pardons than anything that maybe he wasn't aware of. So remember, you had Mike Johnson right before the election. I could go Laura, but right before the election, he said he met with Joe Biden and said, this is happening. And Joe had no clue something was happening. And he said, I realized that Joe Biden was not making decisions. This happened right before the election. So what say you? Should a president be allowed to use the auto pen? And in which which situation should that be allowed, and which situation is appropriate, and what should happen to the people that we find out might have been signing things on behalf of Joe Biden that maybe weren't authorized. Well, that's going to be a great investigation. In the green room, I should say, Laura Carno, usually with us on Tuesday for Carno Tuesday, but today she comes in for Hump Day Wednesday to make it Carno Tuesday on Hump Day Wednesday. There's some kind of poetry there. I know it's going to happen. Laura, good morning.
Good morning. I want to answer this auto pen thing.
Yes.
Here are the circumstances where I think a president should use an auto pen. When the president doesn't have hands, then he should use an auto pen. Otherwise, Jimmy, I love what Donald Trump has been doing on these executive orders or bill signings, where he's got all of the press in, and he sits there and he signs that, that big old John Hancock style signature, and then answers questions about that which he is signing. That should be the norm, as opposed to presidents, or even as we've seen with a lot of governors, including Colorado's Governor Jared Polis, where they sign behind closed doors and there's no press availability. You are the president of the United States signing a bill into law, signing a pardon, signing an executive order. Have the guts to answer questions about it, because you are working for the American people.
Yeah, that's a great thing, that while he's signing, sometimes I'm wondering, you're signing the right one there? You've been talking the whole time there, Donald. But he seems to get the right signature on there. But he does have a capability of multitasking, and with all deference and due respect to those people, I'm not sure some of the people aforementioned, including Jared Polis, would have the intellectual capability of signing their name and talking and answering questions. I mean, it's gutsy to have to sign a bill that's going to affect millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people, and this is how we're going to screw your life over, and let me take questions about it. That's pretty gutsy, and there's a lot of things getting signed in Colorado that I don't think Jared would have the guts to actually give an answer to.
Right. If this is your agenda and you worked with the legislature, whether it's your state legislature or Congress, to get a bill passed, and you are signing it into law, as you said, affecting, hundreds of thousands to millions of people, have the guts to stand there and talk about it. This is your law. This is something you want. This is your agenda. Stand up for it. Don't be a baby.
Don't be a baby, Joe, and all these people. I think it's going to be interesting to see. Laura, what happens if they find out, James Comer finds out, and so maybe through sworn testimony, because these people are going to have to go under oath, and he says he's already identified who was in control of the auto pen. What do we do as a nation if we find out that Joe really wasn't aware of what his signature was going on, or under oath, somebody says, hey, Dr. Jill said he was okay with it, and she told us to do it because he was in nappy time? What happens to us as a country as we reflect back on the last 4 years, if we find out that we had a president that was actually not operating the day-to-day of the White House?
Well, I think it's a furtherance of Americans no longer believing in the institutions of America. When the FBI has failed us, when the Secret Service has failed us, when all of these institutions that we have loved and trusted for so many decades and centuries have failed us, it is just going to further that. And I think it's going to be bigger than any of those other past failings, especially in the federal government. But legally, I'd be really interested. I don't know any lawyers that practice in this, sort of federal area that would know this. What is that crime? If a law was signed in by somebody who's not the president, number one, maybe the law isn't the law if it wasn't done properly. But also, what is the crime that person, whether it's Joe Biden, the most esteemed of all doctors, or some aide or lawyer or whoever? I read a headline, I think it was on Instapundit yesterday, that there is evidence that people might have been exchanging pardons, and these are people who work in the White House, maybe those auto pen people, exchanging pardons for cash at the end of the Biden administration. There's some kind of big old crimes there. They'd be federal crimes. Fed time is straight time. You don't get out early in Fed time. So I say throw the book at him, whatever it is.
It's going to be interesting. John O'Connor is going to be on the show later, and he's not necessarily his line of work, but he's been a prosecutor, worked in the Watergate era, knows the workings of the government, and I'll ask him that very question: what are the crimes that have been committed? Because you just look at it and say we can't do this. If Donald Trump were incapacitated, and you found out that Don Jr. was making all the decisions, or Melania or Barron, that's not what I voted for. I mean, I like those people, but I'm sorry that the left would be squawking about that, and they should be squawking about this. Speaking of not trusting the institutions of government, I said on Monday that it's very convenient time to announce you have a cancer diagnosis. You have the Comer investigation of the auto pen coming up. You have the View was not very well received. Democrats even doubled down and said he was a coward and should have stepped out of the office. It was really a bad week for the Bidens. And then boom, Monday, we have cancer. Don't mess with us. And it's metastasized to the bone. Even Ezekiel Emanuel, Rahm Emanuel's brother, who's an oncologist, said it doesn't happen that way. It's probably been with him for 10 years. There were some shows last night talking about the bruises that he always had on his hand. They think that might have been some kind of an injection or chemo treatment into the bruises in his hands. The point is what do we do if we found out that we had a president who had a cancer diagnosis and had been holding that back for whatever reason? They held back Beau Biden's cancer diagnosis until he was basically almost dead. What do you say about that? Because that's some scary stuff as well.
Yeah, completely scary. And especially if we, as many of us, most of us probably suspect, he had this cancer when he was running the first time, may have even had it as vice president, maybe not, but at least when he was running for president the first time. And what if you were lying during a campaign to the American people and potentially not using the great doctors at Walter Reed, but using that, I don't know if you saw the stories about this doctor sort of follows Joe Biden around, but he was not only a doctor, a business partner in the Biden family business. So if you that's the doctor who's saying, no, he's fine. We don't need a PSA test, which is unbelievably ridiculous. But all of those lies, not just during his administration, but during his campaign, I think it's going to go to significant distrust, not only of the institutions, as we've talked about, but of politicians, maybe Democrat politicians in particular, but politicians generally. I want some proof. Show me the receipts. If you say that you're well, have crowdsource it. Have lots of doctors take a look at it and ask you questions.
He's the first president that did not release a PSA test. They say his staff says he didn't get it. You can't believe the staff. They're the ones auto-pinning, so you don't know what his staff is. But you figure here, the president of the United States, and they tell people upper 70s, 80s, you don't need about the PSA because something's going to get you anyway, and it's such a slow-growing cancer. But if you're the president of the United States, the PSA is a blood panel, part of the blood panel. They take the blood. They're screening him for everything else, so I'm sure they didn't say, hey, don't do the PSA test. I'm guessing that didn't happen.
Right. It's a $5 add-on. I mean, this isn't like, it's too expensive. I saw an interview, I don't know, MSNBC or CNN, one of the two, where they said, well, when gentlemen get older, they just don't do that test anymore because of the expense. Really? We're worried about the $5 extra PSA test. That's ridiculous. This is not an invasive test. It is part of a blood panel that men over 50 get. And if you're the president of the United States, there's no way you wouldn't get it. But interestingly, Jimmy, and you may have talked about this and I may have missed it, but there are old clips of Joe Biden referring to having cancer. And so because one of two things has to be true. Number one, they didn't test him because they knew he had, or they didn't keep testing him because they knew he had it and didn't want to have to disclose it, or they tested him, diagnosed him, treated him, and kept that from the American people. Either one is terrible. But back to your point about bruises on his hands and stuff like that, that certainly would indicate that he was being treated for something, whether it was that or not. But as you say, what a cluster mess.
A cluster mess it is, and the lies they've been telling about his health are horrible. And when John O'Connor pops in here in a bit, I want to ask him, and again, it's take a special kind of lawyer prosecutor, but if somebody was illegally signing the president's name and it comes out into the Comer committee that they swear to God they they pardon someone, as the speculation is even some are making money off this, or were getting permission from Dr. Jill Biden but didn't have permission from the president, is there a crime committed, and how do you prove that? I think that's going to be a fascinating investigation because and what part of his executive orders and or edicts and or pardons are null and void if he was not cognitively aware that they had been signed in his name. So the bank won't recognize a check if someone has forged your signature. So if we have a forged signature, I'm wondering what part of the Biden administration is going to be voided there. All right, Laura, real quickly, let's dive into a couple of other topics we have. You sent me an X feed from Twitter. X is Twitter, but I still get it mixed up. I'm an old guy. Mike Lee said, sad when Congress snatches defeat from the jaws of victory, and is talking about Doge. Senator Mike Lee from Utah, give me your thoughts.
Yeah, so what Senator Lee was talking about was an interview that Elon Musk did, a TV interview, and the interviewer said, are you going to be giving money in politics again? He famously spent a ton of money in the Trump election and getting senators elected so that there would be a majority, a ton of money in those swing states. And he's disappointed in what's going on. In his words, we had a once in a lifetime opportunity to get a good government, to have a streamlined government that only does what it's supposed to do. And, Congress isn't getting their act together and codifying this thing. Yeah, I get it. There's a big, beautiful bill that's another cluster mess right now that needs to get passed for a lot of reasons. And I get the opposition from the Freedom Caucus. That's where my heart is as well. But we've got to get all of these DOJ-related executive orders codified, and we have to have people running these agencies and rooting out the people who are working in them, that are working against them, so that these agencies can, if they exist at all, can actually do the work that's productive and doesn't stifle innovation and stifle the economy and stifle capitalism. We've got to do that. This is the once in a lifetime opportunity. So he said, Elon Musk said, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to give any money again. If I see a need to, I will, but probably not.
Yeah, Republicans have truly not necessarily been great in the houses of Congress, and I get a lot of diversity, a lot of different districts, but Republicans have not necessarily done all that they could be doing, I think, up until this point, but maybe they're going to get some momentum going after this. We shall see. Laura, one more quick story with you I would like to hit is another one you send me, is evidently the Republicans and the Hegseth Department of Defense are not going to let this Afghanistan withdrawal stop. There's been, quote, investigations before, but Hegseth says, no, we're going to investigate it again, but we're going to investigate it so that there's actually some accountability, which is different than an investigation where they just look and make an announcement. He's want accountability.
Right. And that's one of the things I appreciate about so many of these appointees in the Trump administration is that they're not interested in saying, oh, these generals did something bad, let's just slap them on the wrist and let them retire. No, that 13 service members lost their lives in direct response to the terrible withdrawal or abandonment, I like to call it, of Afghanistan. Not to mention how many other dozens or hundreds of Afghanis who worked with the American military to help us. It was so, for those of your listeners old enough to remember a similar thing happening during the Vietnam War, just horrifying to see America abandon its allies, abandon its own soldiers. A friend's son was over there. I heard some very inside, horrifying stories about what happened there, and it needs to get looked into. And I think somebody like Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump, they are the ones that are going to be doing that. Donald Trump has constantly said nobody got fired, no military members got fired for that, and people need to get fired. And I think the accountability word that you mentioned, that's what Americans are looking for. Not just what happened, but who's accountable and what are their consequences going to be? Because that's the message to future people, not to do those same things again. And they're not mistakes. They were deliberate, terrible policy decisions.
Laura Carno, always a pleasure. You have a website called fastercolorado.org. Give the thumbnail of what you do at fastercolorado.org, and maybe somebody will pitch you a couple of dollars to help the cause.
Perfect. Yeah, we train the very many armed school staff here in Colorado. We help school boards who are going through that process of implementing those policies. And because of our work over the last 9 years, there are, more than probably 450 now armed staffers protecting children today in schools. So we're very proud of that work. Also, I have, hang on for the number, 927 tomato plants left that are unclaimed. So if people want their heirloom tomato plants and they're anywhere near Elbert County, Colorado, hit me up. We've got lots of plants for you.
Take the wagon train out to Elbert. It's a long ways out there, but she's got how many 900 something unclaimed?
Yeah, 927 that have not pre-sold. I'm not going to give the embarrassing number of the ones that I grew because I keep saying I'm going to downsize, Jimmy. And it's so difficult.
You didn't like my comment about the wagon train out to Elbert?
No. It's like when Michael Bloomberg said that they don't even have roads in Colorado Springs. Don't diss my little county.
Ladies and gentlemen, I called Laura this week to talk about something, and she was in the car, and she was going to a tomato plant exchange. Somebody had some varieties of tomatoes that she didn't have, and she was driving like for 4 days. She was sleeping on the side of the road to get to this house so she could get some tomato plants that no one else had.
It was just Denver. This is a lady in Denver who does her own crosses. And for nerdy plant people, new varieties are like the height of nerdiness. So a tomato variety that nobody else has, I got to get me that.
Didn't we just ban that? Fauci was doing some of that crossing stuff and creating gain of function. You're doing gain of function on tomato plants.
Nobody's dying from tomato plants. So stop it, Jimmy. But you were so funny. I said, I'm heading to my tomato lady. It took you a second. You go, you have a tomato lady? Why would you have a tomato lady?
You are the tomato lady. Ain't nobody better than a tomato lady like you. All right. No more gain of function on the tomato plants. Be careful out there, especially in China. Don't do that. Laura Carno, fastercolorado.org, fastercolorado.org. Obnoxious Scott says, good morning to the smartest woman I know in Colorado. Laura Carno, he's talking about you. Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome into the program Mr. John O'Connor. He was, you know his name. He was the legal representation for Deep Throat back in the Watergate days. Also coming up right after this, I'm going to be telling you a little update on our charity fundraiser event that we did over the weekend, our casino gala. How close did we get to our $50,000 fundraising goal? I'll say not close. We can still change that. I'll give you the update on the casino gala update for Rivers Promise. You see the charity right over my arm. And hopefully the next 30 to 45 days, I will be going over to Rwanda to check on my work there and Legacy Christian Academy. So we'll stand by. I'll give you full update. And maybe producer Chad has a couple of photos from the casino event that you may want to see. John O'Connor is in the green room waiting patiently for me to stop my yapping so he can start his yapping. John O'Connor, good morning, sir.
How are you, Jimmy?
I'm doing very well. How's the beautiful state of California, sir? They still let you live there?
They let me live there. They've given me a pass. Gavin Newsom's getting moderate, so he's decided not to deport me. And everything's beautiful in the state. It's a beautiful state. I'm out near the beach right now, and it's going to be 70 degrees and sunny, and everything's going to be beautiful. Yeah. Now, of course, if I make $1 today, I will give 50 cents of it to the taxing authorities, and some more when I buy gas and so forth and so on. So we have a little problem here, and we're still $12 billion short on our budget in the state. So it's a mess. It's a mess. I think I got a good word from you today. Cluster mess. This state is a cluster mess.
It is a cluster mess indeed. And having lived in California, San Jose area, several years back for about 18 months or so, to 24 months maybe, a beautiful state, but man, it is a cluster mess faux show, and it's even become more clusterized as a mess in the last several years since I left there. John O'Connor, I want to get into this topic of James Comey who should have known better, putting something stupid on Instagram and now being investigated. But before I do, just a question I told my listeners I would ask you, because you've been a prosecutor. If we find out, and again, this is, you can say I have no clue, Lakey, let's move on. If we find out that James Comer's investigation in the House shows that there were auto-pinning pardons, executive orders, signing legislation that somehow Joe Biden was not aware of, or someone else was giving the orders, has that ever been adjudicated or looked at? Are there charges that can be filed if you have a president's signature being basically forged or put on things that he wasn't aware of? Has this ever been discussed or been a problem in America?
It's been a problem, but not one that anybody ever addressed. Woodrow Wilson was essentially in a coma, and his wife, I believe her name was Edith, was running the country there for maybe a year and a half, and nobody seemed to know it. And there's never been any redress for that. So what I would say is, yes, if you can prove, for example, that Biden had absolutely no idea about the pardons he was giving, let's say, for example, and so forth, and he didn't authorize anybody to give pardons, then of course those pardons are invalid. That said, I think it's going to be virtually impossible to prove. Number one, there's nothing wrong with the president delegating authority. He does that all the time. And if the president can orally delegate authority and say, hey, go sign this for me, and that's okay. I mean, he can do whatever he wants, really, in terms of delegation. There's nothing wrong with an oral delegation of authority. I hate to say that. And of course, we're not going to be able to go back in time and actually get the evidence that he was actually incompetent. We know pretty much, if you have eyes and ears, you know that the guy was most likely incompetent. But can we prove it in a very solid way? Of course, not now. We would do it inferentially by circumstantial evidence. If he's in this condition X now, he was likely that way a year ago. So I think, even though it is correct that probably other people were running the country, and he had no knowledge of it, or at least was not compos mentis, I think that ship has sailed. I mean, I think it's good for Comer to get into this so that we can all see what's happened, but there's not a snowball's chance in Hades that anything will come in terms of unspooling what's already been spun. And so I think we're in tough shape on that one.
Well, it's fascinating to see the Democrats all going, yeah, he should have dropped out. Now they're all throwing Joe Biden under the bus, but they all covered him. The media covered him and covered up for him. What you and I kind of saw was obvious, that he was incompetent, but it's kind of scary that somewhere, I don't know if this comes from Congress, I don't know what happens to happen, but this auto pen seems like it's going to need some boundaries around it. You can do it if you're overseas, but I don't know. It's reckless use of the auto pen. Is this something that can be legislated, that we control how the signature is given?
Say no. I think it would be a case of the legislature intruding on the executive's prerogatives. The executive now, it would be a good idea for the executive to put down his own rules and regs so that no one can forge his signature. It might be a good idea for the executive to do that. And each president can have his own rules, can amend them as he wishes, but it is a matter for his discretion. So now, an interesting point was brought up by a commentator I heard the other day, and it makes all the sense of the world. There are a lot of people getting rich on these pardons, because the auto pens are kind of up for grabs in the White House, and probably anyone with access to the inner circle could take advantage of these pardons. You're a guy, I mean, what's a good pardon worth? $500,000? I mean, think about how easy it is to enrich yourself in this situation. And I think what we probably will find, if we look closely enough, I would like him to do this to see who got paid by the pardoned people. If we can trace that, that would be very interesting, because even if we even if technically there was authority to sign by somebody saying, oh, yeah, well, President Biden said I could do this or said this was okay. Did somebody get money for this? I would be very interested in that, because I'm sure that's going to be the case. Now, are we going to look into it or not? I don't know.
Yeah, so if Comer investigates that somebody was making some money off of these auto pin signatures, even with Joe Biden's permission, but they were selling them off in the black market, that would seem like that would be something the Justice Department could come in and investigate.
Yes, that is something that the Justice Department can do. And in doing that, I think would have a good public purpose, because it would be a way of getting behind what was going on in the White House here and showing what happens not only when you have a dishonest White House, but when you have a dishonest media. I mean,
Yeah.
the media has been hailing themselves as watchdogs ever since Watergate. And one of the examples they brought up in Watergate was, look at how good we are now. We would never allow the sort of things that happened with Woodrow Wilson, where he was incompetent, no one knew it, or FDR, where no one in the country knew that he was disabled.
Yeah.
But guess what happens? Now we have, right in the middle of our great media, right in the middle of them, where they all have contacts in the White House, and they're telling us that they didn't know. Come on, it really looks bad.
Yeah, what I know, and I don't have contacts in the White House, I can watch and go, ain't something right with that. That's not good. Then I think Jake Tapper, these guys probably should have known if they were opened their eyes up and were willing to see it. John O'Connor, very quickly, you have worked as a federal prosecutor before, and I'm sure you've been watching very interesting times as the Secret Service has called brother James Comey in, former FBI director, and said, hey, you were walking on the seashore looking for seashells, and somehow a message about a 8 feet long, 6 foot deep. That's the mechanism for 86, and put him in a grave under investigation for an Instagram photo. What do you think was going through James Comey's mind while he was on the seashore looking for seashells?
Well, as they used to call him behind his back, Cardinal Comey, for his hypocritical pomposity, they used to call him the Cardinal. Yes, first of all, I'm not so sure that someone else did those shells. I think this is something he could have done himself. He happened to run into, I think there was another one where he ran into a painted shell of some kind, or a painted pineapple or something that was political. He seems to run into political things on the beach all the time. But what he was doing, he was trying to give a cute political shot at Trump. And he knows very well what 86 means. And this is his way of being cute, trying to be relevant, and so forth and so on. And it's silly. I think he said, first of all, the guy is not trustworthy. And I've got a piece in the Blaze today, I believe, that talks about his history of his weaving spider tactics. He's just a sneaky guy who does not tell the truth. Starting out with Martha Stewart and Scooter Libby, going on to General Michael Flynn, then Russiagate. This guy is a sneaky guy, and so forth. So when he says, Jimmy, he's the head of the world's greatest law enforcement agency, and he says that, he thought, like, he talked to his wife who used to work in a restaurant. He thinks that means taking something off of the menu. Or when someone wants to ditch the restaurant, that's 86. No, it isn't. You are the ditchee. If you're an 86 from a restaurant, you're tossed out. But of course, the more sinister meaning is the one that is you just take somebody out and kill them.
Yeah.
And that's him. He knows that. He knows that. So for him to now say that he didn't know that alternative meaning, yes. I mean, he was putting it out there, and he could always say, well, it meant throwing the guy out of the bar. That's what most of us think of 86 is. So he knew it. He knew that it at least had one sinister connotation to it, and that, but he couldn't help but being cute and relevant. And what I got to say about this, Jimmy, is what's good about this furor is is that Comey, if he did this 6 years ago, everybody would have applauded him. The media would not be making a deal of this. He would get a pass. He's not getting a pass now. And it's good that our country's getting a little more commonsensical here.
He was taken in by the Secret Service. The FBI says they're not going to get involved unless Secret Service asks them to get involved. You've been in the prosecutor's office in the U.S. Attorney's office. Kind of talk about what that's like. Secret Service takes the lead. Their FBI is waiting for a phone call. And that's the first question. The second one is also they said they're bringing in James Comey's wife to interrogate or to question her. What is that process like?
Well, it's very informal. The Secret Service will have somebody in. Sometimes they'll go out and visit them at their place, at their residence. But it will just question about what you meant and what you did. It's really a searching examination. But this will only get criminal if the Secret Service makes a criminal referral. If they have reason to believe that there's been, for instance, a crime within their province, which would be a threat on the president, then they would refer it. And it may well be that they sort of do this with a hot potato. Look, this is a case that you're not going to win in front of a jury. That's the fact of it. It's too divided a case. You can't prove it's beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the standard in a criminal case, that he intended to threaten the president. Okay, it obviously shows bad judgment. That's clear. And if there were a civil case in which he was being sued for, let's say, something happened to the president, I mean, and it's by someone who was inspired by the Seychelles, yeah, he might be civilly liable. But so the hot potato might be passed to the U.S. Attorney's Office. They might make a big deal about it. It'd be great publicity that the feds are criminally investigating this, and it's now over with justice in the U.S. Attorney's Office. But what that prosecutor will do was he or she will decline prosecution, saying that even though in all probability he meant to threaten the president, there is not enough beyond a reasonable doubt proof to bring a criminal case here. So that's what's going to happen. He's not going to get criminally charged. But I like the idea of the process going forward and everybody understanding and keeping the searchlights on this guy.
And they bring the wife in. Is that unusual to bring a wife in and see if she can maybe turncoat on him? What are they expecting for the wife to come in?
Well, it's not unusual if she's a witness to a potential crime. So that's not that unusual. They don't expect her to turncoat. And of course, and by the way, she has a privilege. She doesn't even have to state what he told her. If she wants to, she can invoke the marital privilege. But she'll have a story ready, and she'll talk about how she was a waitress, and that we used to say 86 meant 86, the tomato bisque, from the menu. Come on, give me a break.
Yeah, well, you at least hope that her getting questioned by by law enforcement or Secret Service will cause her to go home and say, James, I swear to God, you don't ever put me in that situation again. Maybe at least there could be some marital or spousal pressure on him. I don't know, but it seems like maybe this is he outplayed his hand this time, because usually he'd be celebrated for this, but now he's not getting out from under it. He's actually being looked at and criticized for it.
And his wife is a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. He's mentioned that in the past. His wife and his daughters are. So you're not going to get anybody turning on him.
Well, were you speaking of prosecutors before we have to go? Helena Baba, I think, is the New Jersey U.S. attorney, head of the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey, and they have decided to file charges against this member of Congress that was body bumping and thrusting herself at ICE agents at that ICE detention center. Is this a sign that the Department of Justice is finally, and Secret Service is finally saying, hey, Democrats, you've been getting by with this kind of a nefarious behavior, and you've gotten a pass, and you're not going to get a pass. You're going to live by the same rules. I mean, the James Comey even being questioned, the member of Congress being charged. Is this just kind of a sign of turning? And is this something that just the Democrats are going to say they've weaponized the justice system because we're being held accountable now?
Yeah, Yeah. It's great that they talk about weaponizing the justice system, where they put thousands of people through the criminal process for January 6th. There might be a few people there that should have been prosecuted, but for somebody wandering around there, and they bring the wrath of God on them in that case. And now, when someone has committed a palpable crime, a provable crime that's on tape, and interfering with our justice system physically, to me, this is a sign that we're getting some sense of equal justice. I think the public will like it and they will respect it, because this is clearly something that should not happen. Obviously, she's not going to get, I don't think she's getting any kind of a jail sentence. But should she be prosecuted? Yes, she should be. And I hope they go forward with this. It's there. You just can't do this. Even Martin Luther King, who was in favor of protests, said, if you're going to get into civil disobedience, you got to pay the price. You got to actually be convicted of the crime. And so there's nothing good about what she did.
Not at all. The voice of John O'Connor, if you're listening on the podcast later in the day, if you're watching us live, you see that on the screen. If you're just listening, it's John O'Connor. He was Deep Throat's attorney. He discovered that the Washington Post had betrayed his client while covering up the truth about Watergate, and that's caused him to write a book called Postgate. You can go to postgatebook.com, find us a great podcast about the secrets of Watergate or the behind the scenes you might not have known, and also Postgate, if you wonder why we have partisan journalism to the level we do today. It all started in that Watergate era, and John O'Connor was in the middle of it. John, I gave my plug of your website, postgatebook.com. I'll let you give the plug of your website and or your book, because you'll probably do better than I did.
Well, I think you said it all. I would go, for your audience, I would go to postgatebook.com. There are 2 books I've got on there that I feature. There's both Postgate and then a book called The Mysteries of Watergate, What Really Happened. They're fun. But I've also got maybe 120 articles that I've published the last few years. And there are probably a dozen on there that feature James Comey and what he did during Russiagate. So that's going to make good reading for someone who wants to sort of bone up on what Comey's done and how much harm he did to our country during Russiagate. I keep this website mainly for educational purposes, and it's fun to do it. It costs me a few bucks to do it, and I'm very, very happy to contribute. So I'd love people to go on that site, and if they want to buy my book, that's great, but there's plenty to look at there.
And you got a new one coming out, you think, in The Blaze. I'm sure it'll also be linked up on your site here real soon, but that's about Cardinal Comey and his self-righteous self. He's a real cluster mess, John. That Comey's a cluster mess.
It's a 6-day cluster mess. You're absolutely right.
John O'Connor, I appreciate you, my friend. Postgatebook.com. Go check it out. You can also find a link to a great podcast there about the mysteries of Watergate as well. Postgatebook.com. If you don't go there, you don't love America. That's probably a little stretch, but you get the idea. Go there, check it out, postgatebook.com. The podcast is there. There's 2 books, and if you want to understand today's partisan journalism, go to postgatebook.com, get the book, and you'll understand how a lot of the stuff you see today all started back in the days of Watergate. All right, before we wrap up today, I want to do a couple of stories that have been on the meme sheet or the show sheet for a couple of days, and I haven't done them. And I want to do one about the Pope. I find this quite interesting for those of you that are let me find. I got to find the right story. The Pope, Pope Leo is out there, and Pope Leo affirms that family is based on the union between a man and a woman, and unborn children have inherent dignity. Anyway, there's some stories out there and talking about these cardinals, and you just got to, let me link these up. I don't have time to get into them, but there's several quotes in here from sources that basically said that Pope Francis was not all that nice a guy. He was not easy to deal with, and he had burned a lot of bridges. And one of the reasons that people were able to get around Pope Leo, or Robert Prevost before he became Pope, is because he was a little bit nicer. And it's really interesting stories coming out, and you can find some of them. Let me put some of them up there. But again, God rest his soul. Let God sort out anybody that passes. I'm not the judge, but it is interesting how the stories are being told and leaked out there that perhaps Pope Francis was very, 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 let's say, sensitive. Matter of fact, if you know, we talk about Joe Biden not having a cabinet meeting, and his cabinet said, according to the Jake Tapper book, that his cabinet was isolated from him and quarantined from him, and some of them didn't see him for a year or so. He never had a meeting, and they, of course, the cabinet should have resigned, should have called for a constitutional crisis, and they could have invoked one of the amendments and said, Joe, you're done here. But Kamala's a gutless wonder as well. And so they never stood up against the demented Joe Biden, who they were quarantined from. And it sounds as if Pope Francis also quarantined himself. He appointed dozens and dozens of cardinals, but he never convened the College of Cardinals together, and he never had a meeting of cardinals. So when these cardinals all showed up, a lot of them had been appointed by Francis, but they had never met their other cardinals. And there's a lot of backstory going on here about Pope Francis. And again, I'm not Catholic. I'll let you guys inside the Catholic Church judge yourselves and hold yourselves accountable, and you figure out what happened. But there's a lot of stories out there that while we've been told that Francis was this, and this, there's some backstories that say he was this, and this. And just a man of a lack of tolerance as far as dissenting opinion, a man who isolated himself or isolated people who he figured were in opposition rather than having a discussion about him. So it's an interesting couple of stories, and they've been on my show sheet. I wanted to get out there. And Pope Leo, there was some question, is he going to be a moderate or a conservative? Is he going to be like Francis and not stand up on some real, what we'd say, cultural, but also solid biblical ideas? And Pope Leo has affirmed that marriage is between a man and a woman, and if you're unborn, you have an inherent dignity that should be respected. And that is, I'm sure, going to make the left out there not very happy that he's taking a hard line on that. There's a couple of stories out there I want to get to. Did you hear that the White Sox in Chicago have released a mural of Pope Francis because he was a White Sox fan? And when he'd go to Chicago, the Pope would go to, Robert Prevost at the time would go to a White Sox game. So evidently there's a new mural at the White Sox Stadium. But it's a couple of fascinating stories. I just find it interesting because we're told by the media that we're supposed to, this person was above reproach, and you find out, I guess they weren't. There was a lot of behind the scenes going on. Matter of fact, if the Newsmax has a story, let me just, I'll put it up. It's The Secrets of the Conclave. They said this behind the scenes was one of the most tumultuous papal conclaves in recent memory. Cardinals of the Roman Church settling on what appears to be a unifying pope. And it's remarkable he became the pope, but he became the pope because Francis had really set things up into disarray. The discussions about replacing Pope Francis began almost immediately after his death on April the 21st. Meetings, general congregations at first were comprised of Vatican-based cardinals, but then the number swelled as people came in from around the world. And sources said as these cardinals started getting together, they became quite frank and at times quite difficult conversations. One participant secretly said the opening days of the not the conclave, but the funeral gathering was chaos. Francis had named so many cardinals, and many had never even met before. Other cardinals were shocked to hear tales of mismanagement and abuses under Francis. Media didn't report them, but the cardinals got there and they found out that there was, quote, mismanagement and abuses under Francis. Though Francis had talked of dialogue and openness in the church, he did not tolerate any criticism well. Nor did Francis have much toleration for church traditions, including the Latin Mass, which he sought to ban. His reprisals against priests and bishops and cardinals who spoke out against some of his radical statements and policies were often petty and nasty. The cardinals start getting together and comparing stories with each other and begin to openly discuss these and other problems that Pope Francis had caused the church during their pre-conclave meetings. They started having discussions. So these cardinals had never met each other. They get together and say, hey, do you know this happened? And they start comparing notes. One problem was the bad concordat made between the Vatican and China. Some say that the agreement with the communist Chinese regime and Pope Francis was a sellout and gave Beijing de facto control over the Catholic Church in China. Cardinal Parolin, the Vatican Secretary of State, was largely blamed for this. And then there were other financial abuses in the Vatican under Pope Francis. The Vatican has numerous financial problems, including a $1.5 billion unfunded liability in its pension program. Several cardinals insisted that the Pope the next pope leave the Vatican Hotel, Santa Marta, and return to the papal apartments. Francis lived in Santa Marta, which is a nicer apartment complex. It caused security problems. And if anybody came to visit other cardinals, they didn't have a place because he took up an entire floor. And they said, no, you got it. You live in the papal apartment. And Francis evidently said, I can't live in the papal apartment. I'd be very lonely there. I have to be out among the people. So by the time the papal conclave was done, Leo was out of the hotel. He said, well, I'm out. I'll live in the apartment. Another person said Parolin was a good priest, but had been tortured by Francis, who changed his mind every 5 minutes. This is the guy that was kind of the day-to-day operator of the Vatican, and said this guy was terrorized by Francis, who changed his name and was notoriously difficult to work with. Cardinal Parolin had sought to resign more than once as Secretary of State for the Vatican, but was urged to stay because he was a stabilizing force. And so by the time the conclave got together, the word was out on Pope Francis, and the cardinals said, we have to go a different direction and find somewhere in the middle, and that's what they did. It's a really interesting story. It's been on my show sheet for about a week, 6 days, 5 days, and I just wanted to get to it because I just like to get behind the scenes of this mystery conclave, in which we're told that everything is candy and well wishes and the sparkly unicorns, and then you find out that Pope Francis was notoriously a pain in the arse, and some people said they just couldn't support the church going in the same direction as it had under Francis. So anyway, there you have that story. I wanted to get it off the show sheet. Let me put that story up from Newsmax, and it's John Gizzi who wrote the story. And John writes it's a great piece by him behind the scenes. And I'll put it up at facebook.com/Jimmy Lakey fan page, facebook.com/Jimmy Lakey fan page, facebook.com/Jimmy Lakey fan page. All right, two things. I told you I would talk to you and give you information about our casino gala. It was a great night the other night. Producer Chad and I were there. It's good to see a lot of folks there. We had a fundraising goal, not for that night, but for this month, of about $50,000, because we want to finish up our operational fundraise for the remainder of 2025. And if we hit that $50,000 mark, that will get me out of OPEX fundraising, and I can then go to CAPEX fundraising, because we have a $300,000 matching grant ready to go to finish the construction of a school. But I can't really start working on that until we fund the OPEX. Listen, if you have not given in correlation with the gala, maybe you didn't attend, maybe you were there, maybe you weren't there, maybe you thought about it, would you go make a donation today? riverspromise.org, write gala, G-A-L-A, or write Vegas, or write casino, whatever you do. Let us know, and I will count any of those donations towards the $50,000 goal. We're well short of it right now. We did a great job the other night, a great event. And we appreciate everybody being there, but we said all along through now and the end of the next 10 days, we'd like to get to that 50,000 mark. And if you could help us, we would appreciate it. I'll say this again. I said this at the gala the other night. $30 feeds a kid 2 meals a day for 30 days. It's $1 a day. $65 not just feeds them, but sends them to school. And I will say this, and anybody's been there, you'll know that these kids would not eat, nor would they be in school without our efforts there. So we would love to have you participate if you can. Now, some of you say $30, I got 30. Give 30. Some of you can give 300. That takes care of 10 kids. Some of you give 650. That's education for 10 kids one time. You can also set up a recurring donation if you like. We appreciate that as well. And we really do want your help because I want to get out of the OPEX business here for the next couple of months and start working on our capital expense and finishing up our elementary, our primary school campus K through 6. We have half the funds matching grant ready to go. I've already raised another 50 on top of the matching grant. So we're well on our way, but I can't focus on that until I can make sure the kids are getting fed every month. And you can help us with that and make sure they're in school. So help us out if you would. It's riverspromise.org. Make that donation. Make it a one-time, make it a recurring donation, and we appreciate your help. I appreciate your help, and probably within 30 days or so, I will be walking 30 to 45 days. I'll be walking the streets of Rwanda. We'll do a couple of shows from there, and I'll give you some of the skinny. But if you can help us today for that casino gala, I appreciate it. Another thing I'd like to thank you, want you to be a part of, is calling Sherry Cree, homeswithsherry.com, homeswithsherry.com. Listen, if you've been contemplating a real estate transaction, you've been thinking of buying or selling, you think it's a great time of year, maybe you're not sure, maybe you've been kind of watching the market and saying, is it volatile? Is this the right time? What's the housing market look like long-term in Colorado? What does it look like short time in Colorado? Wherever you're at on your real estate journey, Sherry Cree wants to jump in and be your realtor for life. She wants to build that kind of trust, that kind of relationship, so she can be your realtor for life. She got a call from one person. I've told you the story before. She got a call from someone she hadn't talked to in 3 or 4 years. And they said, hey, this is us. And she said, oh, great. How did your last move go? She had met with this family and thought that they went with another realtor. Sherry's fine with that. Not everybody's a perfect fit. They said, no, you gave us great advice. So we've been sitting still for 2 or 3 years. And now we want to follow your advice and we're going to move now. And so that's what it is. It's not about an immediate listing. It's about that relationship to get some outside eyes, some consultation and conversation, and then figure out what might be best for you, whether it's your upsize or downsize of a home. Maybe you're ready to go to the ranch home. Maybe you need more bedrooms for your baby making machines or something. I don't know, whatever the case may be. Sherry wants to help you. She'll get you in the great neighborhood, the best schools. And she can also just talk about just all sorts of level of your strategy, because if you play it right, you know this, I know this, that real estate, if it's done right, can really create generational wealth. And that's what she wants you to make those transactions. Homeswithsherry.com, homeswithsherry.com, homeswithsherry.com. Go to the website, check it out, and give her a phone call and have that conversation. Again, maybe you're not quite ready, but maybe you want to start finding out what it takes to get ready to sell or to buy or to move. She can help you with that. So if you're in the Denver area, the I-25 corridor up towards the Fort Collins region, out towards Berthoud and Loveland, and you understand the idea. If you're down in Littleton or Parker, she can help you there. Homeswithsherry.com, homeswithsherry.com. Be sure to mention Jimmy Lakey when you call her. I know you will. Homeswithsherry.com. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had a great time with Laura Carno and John O'Connor on the program. Don't forget to go to all of the, Cody says, Salam, Sultan Jimmy and Jeannie Chad. If you wonder why he calls me Sultan Jimmy, it's because producer Chad has dubbed me the Sultan of Sarcasm today. You're welcome. Thank you. And I own that. Thank you. Let me do this. We're going to do the stolen memes section of the show while you contemplate your donation to charity. And riverspromise.org, riverspromise.org. We'll love to have your donation today. But here we go. Stolen memes. We go around the globe and we steal memes from where we don't exactly know. But we steal them because we're cheap and we don't want to make our own. And we're lazy. We don't want to make our own. So we usually steal someone else's because they're better than what producer Chad and I did. Round around the globe we go, where we steal the memes from no one knows. Liberals, this is a guy with bug-eyed looking, he's a gun owner, says, liberals say, but if you ban abortions, women will just get them illegally. And gun owners are going, yeah, you think so? Yeah, listen, let that sink in out there, you libtards. If you that's what you say. If you ban abortions, they're going to go to the back alley and get them illegally with a coat hanger. And gun owners are going, yeah, that's what we're saying about the guns. They're going to be all illegal guns if you ban them, you jackwagons. That's a great one. By the way, warning, producer Chad said he's got about 6 memes total, so we're down to 5. And he says, some of them I will spew coffee through my nose if I'm not careful. So therefore, I've not had a sip of coffee in the last several seconds. Round around the globe we go, where we steal the memes from no one knows. Fact, here's a picture of the squad. And then here's a caption. Americans don't dislike these dingbats because we are racist towards women of color. We dislike them because they are disrespectful, hateful, anti-American lunatics. Yeah, that's true. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and your band of merry fools that you hang out with, you call the squad. We don't care if you're a woman of color. Matter of fact, I didn't even notice the color of your skin. I dislike you because you're disrespectful, hateful, anti-American lunatic, also known as a libtard. That's what you are. Round and round the globe we go, where we steal the memes from no one knows. Here we go. Here's Dr. Jill Biden. Oh, the most esteemed doctor on the planet, Dr. Jill. I don't care. I'll drag that old man through broken glass before I'll give up the status and the attention I crave. Isn't that true? It's pointing that Jill Biden was not just an evil woman. You look at all the cognitive decline, the probable cancer diagnosis that have been hidden, and also that Jill Biden could dress up in a dress that looked like a shower curtain from a cheap-ass hotel and call herself the first lady. I'm sorry. I think history will not just judge Joe for what we know he's going to be judged for. I think Jill Biden will go down in history as a not very nice woman for what some people are calling elder abuse of old demented Joe Biden. Round around the globe we go, where we steal the memes from no one knows. Here's one. It's a picture of a beach and a sunset. For those who are watching on the podcast or listening on the podcast, a picture of a beautiful tropical beach and a sunset, the gold and the oranges and the red and the sunset. And it says, how's y'all summer bodies coming along? Mine's looking like it's going to have a great personality. How's your summer body? It's got a great personality. Yeah, boy, can he cook. That was one my grandma always said. Honey, I got a girl I want to introduce you to. And I said, was she beautiful? Boy, can she cook. That was always, that means she's bigger than a double wide, going on a triple wide, but boy, she could cook the chicken fried. And I usually avoided those. Round and round the globe we go, where we steal the memes from, no one know. A woman on a beach with a kangaroo, and here's the caption. They are cute and seem harmless, but they are loud, incredibly expensive to keep, and absolutely untrainable. The other one in the picture is a kangaroo. I don't really know much about the kangaroos. Yeah, you get it? All the guys out there are saying amen. They're cute, they seem harmless, they're loud, and incredibly expensive to keep, absolutely untrainable. And the other one in the photo is a kangaroo, and I don't know much about the kangaroo, but I've described half the photo. Round and round the globe we go, where we steal the memes from, no one knows. It's please bring me a screwdriver. And she's going to say flathead, Phillips, or vodka. And that's when I knew that she was the one for me. If you had this relationship with someone you're dating, hey, honey, bring me a screwdriver. Do you want a flathead, a Phillips, or a vodka? And at that point, you go, yep, keep her, sign her up. She's good. But let's do a prenup just in case she turns out to be back crap crazy. Do we have one more? I think maybe this is 6. Round around the globe we go. We might have milked it dry. Where we steal the memes from, no one knows. Ladies and gentlemen, that ends the stolen meme portion of the show. We didn't want to go, if we stole 7 memes, Gavin Newsom might prosecute us, but we are allowed to at least steal 6 memes, I think, is our limit of the day, based on the prosecutorial and bail laws of the state of Colorado and California. So thanks to our sponsors. If you'd like me to give a shout out to your business, I'd love to do so. Send me an email, info@jimmylakey.com, info@jimmylakey.com. And I mean this sincerely from the bottom of my heart. I ask you to make a donation today. Rivers Promise, there's a child waiting on you today. There are children waiting in the waiting at our school right now. They're praying every day. God, give me a sponsor. Give me a sponsor. And somehow, miraculously, even without a sponsor, we keep them in school. That's $65, and we could use your help today. Riverspromise.org, riverspromise.org. Love to have your help. $65 sends a kid to school, feeds them, takes care of them 1 month at a time, so $65 a month. Or if you just want to do one time, $65 works. Or you can also do this, my friends. You $30 feeds a child 2 meals a day for 30 days, $1 a day. Help us out. Riverspromise.org. And don't forget, all of your donations are tax deductible. And we appreciate your help with the cause, riverspromise.org. And thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up today's show. Good Lord willing, the creeks don't rise. And I guess the electricity is on tomorrow. We should be back here tomorrow morning. Don't forget that. And if you'll tune in, we'd like you to tune in live. If you're not subscribing to us on the podcast, by the way, if you're listening on the podcast, you can join us live for video, 8 o'clock Mountain, 10 o'clock Eastern time on all the platforms aforementioned. If you're watching now, you want to go back and listen to the audio only, go to Apple Podcast. Apple Podcast. Somebody said Apple Music. No, it's Apple Podcast. Also, you can go to the Podbean, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and just type in Jimmy Lakey Unleashed. Subscribe it, like it, be a part of the program on the streamcast as well as the live show that happens every day. Until we meet again tomorrow morning, may God bless you. May God bless America. I am Jimmy Lakey. Peace. Looked like Richard Nixon, didn't it? Peace. I'm out of here.